And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Danny Kannell. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at CBS Sports Network and fired up to get your weekend started with a little bit of college football. That's right. July is coming up. Soon we'll have media days. Soon we will have the start of fall camp. And soon we'll be looking across the country, stacking up all of these teams against each other with all of our preseason rankings and ratings. But DK, if it's okay with you, we're going to start with the position that you are very comfortable with. Are you prepared for us to give some definitive Cover 3 podcast quarterback rankings here on this Friday?
Am I prepared for the social media backlash? Yes, we'll see, I guess. But yes, I've done my research. I did want to clarify something because there's always all these kind of lists, right? When you see these quarterback lists, I approached it not from the standpoint of the NFL upside, or if this was a draft, we might do something that at the end of the show. But for right now, for college football, who do you feel most confident right now for a college football quarterback? That's the way I approached it. You might have approached it differently, but that's kind of what I went with is right now on their team in college, who would you want to have? That was my approach as I put these lists together.
Our eternal battle is best against most deserving. I tried to find a little bit of a blend here. Like you said, I did not think about this like an NFL talent evaluator. There are players who are going to not be able to have talents that translate to the NFL that I will have ranked higher than better NFL prospects, taking into consideration what they can do here in college right away. Well, let's waste no time at all. Let's dive right in, and let's begin in the Big Ten. DK, we're going 1 through 5. What is your quarterback ranking for the Big Ten?
You know, I thought about going 1A, 1B, but there's no fun sitting on the fence like that. So I went ahead and I put Julian Sayin at the top of the list for the Ohio State Buckeyes. He was almost perfect last year through an entire season. And then you got to the Big Ten championship game and the playoffs, and then it kind of came settled back to earth. His offensive line got exposed somewhat, but up to that point in the regular season, he was close to flawless. You kept waiting for him to stumble, and he never did. He was close to 80% completion percentage, and he was exactly what Ryan Day, was looking for. To be that game manager early, became a playmaker late. Of course, it helps a ton to have Jeremiah Smith. So I had Julian Sayin at the top of my list for the Big Ten, followed very, very closely by Dante Moore. I love Dante Moore, the upside. This is more of that NFL talent that you talk about. When you see his ease of throwing the football, I think there is some comps out there that you can just see, does he look like Jordan Love with the style of play? Easily. He looks like that. But I still want to see Dante Moore take that next step in the bigger stages. You and I sat in the Orange Bowl against Texas Tech, and it was a perfect example, something that was frustrating with Dante Moore. The first start of the game, he hits a couple big passes, and you're like, oh, yeah, you can see the talent. And then there was just a little bit of sloppiness. It didn't look as clean and crisp. And granted, it was against one of the better defenses in the country, but it left me wanting a little bit more from Dante Moore. So I want to see him take that next step. Then Jaden Maeva at USC is clearly in this conversation too, not trailing by that much. We saw him several times last year flash, and I'll be curious to see what he does in year 2 of Lincoln Riley's system, because I do think he'll take another big step forward with more comfortability, and I think that's a reason why USC should be in that conversation. And then I followed it up with Josh Hoover, the transfer going to Indiana. Some of this, I think he could play himself into the top of this list at the end of the year. We've seen players do this in his system. He got the most out of the last 2 quarterbacks. And then, of course, Fernando Mendoza. That story is one of the best in college football history. But I do think the turnovers that you saw from him from TCU were worth noting. And Sonny Dykes, made note of that. And Kirk Cignetti called that out and said, well, he's never had a run game and a defense, which he will have. So he's going to take that next step. And then I rounded it off with probably one of the best raw talents in Damon Williams out at Washington. You see what he's capable of doing. Just needs some more consistency out of Damon Williams, but he clearly is another one that has the raw talent to be one of the top quarterbacks in the Big Ten. We'll see if he can get it done this year.
Put a pin in that Hoover. I want to come back to that. But first, let's go ahead and let my list get thrown up there on the screen, where I did go with the Dante Moore at 1. And here is where we talk about being a little bit more of a fully formed quarterback, in my opinion. I mean, it was ages ago that he started his career playing for Chip Kelly at UCLA. What he was able to learn playing behind Dillon Gabriel as a backup, finally starting to put it together. For his overall counting stats, I do give him a little bit of grace because of all the injuries that Oregon team took at the wide receiver position last year and how banged up they were. The fact that it became more of a ground and pound game. If we're trying to line up all the Big Ten quarterbacks, you're saying I get to have my pick of who I want. I think Dante Moore is a little bit more fully formed than what we're going to get from Julian Sayin. And I'm glad that you had Julian Sayin at 1, because one of my great storylines in the Big Ten this season is the chip that should be on the shoulder of Ohio State, the chip that should be on the shoulder of Jeremiah Smith, and the chip that should be on the shoulder of Julian Sayin, because that man was a Heisman finalist on the verge of making NCAA single season history, and he looked overwhelmed. He looked like my kids in the deep end at the pool when he started to get into those big games in the Big Ten championship and the college football playoff. And I know Julian Sayin can be better than that. The tools are better than that. The way he played against some of the toughest competition in the regular season was better than that. So Julian Sayin, Dante Moore, that's the 1-2 for me. Like you, I've got Jaden Maeva moved into that as well, rounded out by the same names there in Josh Hoover and Demond Williams. But in the discussion part of this, Danny, I think I draw the line after 3 there, and that's willing to elevate Maeva, and then it's a little bit of a step down into Hoover and Demond Williams for me. How did you see the separation between those two? You mentioned at the top already with the 1A, 1B discussion with Moore and Sayin.
Yeah, I thought those two kind of elevated themselves, but Maeva is right there, right on their heels. And then I think with the rest, like in the case of Josh Hoover, he needs to take that big step forward with consistency, and maybe he gets that, like Kirk Cincinnati talked about. But Maeva is definitely one of the most talented players in the country. He plays with a comfortability behind the line of scrimmage that never looks rattled. He's cool, calm, and collected at the line of scrimmage. And I think more of USC's problems were, getting big plays on third down, being able to get off the field. That's kind of been something that has plagued them. We'll see if Gary Patterson, as a new defensive coordinator, can get some of that. But I think Jaden Maeva is one of those players, those talented players, where if it clicks for him and he plays like he's capable of playing, I absolutely think USC could be a playoff team. So I do think that was sort of you had to make a leap of faith a little bit more with Josh Hoover or Demond Williams in that consideration. So, and then I did have a couple others that I felt I really wanted to get Rocco Becht on this list. I love what he's been about at Iowa State, but another one where you felt like you had to take a leap of faith to get him on this list. How is he going to do jumping into the Big Ten? You have so many moving pieces. He brings a lot of his teammates with him there to Penn State. And then Bryce Underwood was another one that I considered just outside as the freshman, last year, who had some bumps and bruises, getting a new system, a new offensive coordinator with Jason Beck, who does feel like, if you saw what he did with Devin Dampierre last year at Utah, it's like, oh, that's what Bryce Underwood could be, but I kind of need to see it first. So some of the other quarterbacks I thought about had to make that big leap of faith, but the top 2 and definitely 3, I feel very, very confident, and these teams all do, and you feel confident that they're going to have successful seasons because there's zero question about their quarterbacks.
Yeah, because I'm a crazy person, I actually drug this all the way out to 18. You just mentioned my 6 and 7, Bryce Underwood and Rocco Becht. For the Underwood piece of this, when you mentioned Jason Beck, I had a great heat check when I was discussing Bryce Underwood, when it was posited to me, well, yeah, do you really think that in this up-tempo offense, they were going to have anything but vanilla as the flavor in the spring game, not to mention the weather? Maybe you should slow your roll overreacting to what the fans saw in the spring game. Andrew Marsh, their talented sophomore wide receiver, talking to reporters about the way that this up-tempo offense is going to keep defenses on their heels and allow for some of that playmaking ability. It was also pushed. Sam Webb of 24/7 Sports mentioned yesterday, he said, if Bryce doesn't get the footwork right, and if he doesn't get the downfield passing game right, they could just run him, and combined with Jordan Marshall and Savion Hyder, still have a pretty good offense, but that doesn't get you up into top 5 consideration when we're talking about the break glass in case of emergency. But it does lead me to my question. Rocco Becht at Penn State, Bryce Underwood at Michigan. Both of them require a leap of faith. Rocco Becht moving up into a new conference, Bryce Underwood going into his second season with some new coaching. Who do you have more confidence in, Underwood or Becht, to start 2026?
I would say Becht. Just so you know, you've seen a bigger body of work, and granted, is the upside there? No, Bryce Underwood was the number one quarterback coming out of high school for a reason, but I trust Rocco Becht more to kind of the floor. Like, I think there's a floor with Rocco Becht where it's not going to drop out. I do think there's some concern that are valid that if Bryce Underwood doesn't get it, is he the next DJ Lagway? Is he the next, five-star bust that we see? I don't think it happens, but we've seen it before. But at least Rocco Becht, he won a lot of football games at Iowa State. He's put the team on his shoulders. He's led them down the field in 2-minute drills to win games. So I do think, in a new place, new uniform, I feel like there will be some transition, some periods there where it could see a little bit of a struggle, but I trust him more in this college land space to lead his team more than I trust Bryce Underwood at this point.
Do you remember that Michael Jordan used to wear like Carolina shooting shorts under his Chicago Bulls shorts?
Oh yeah.
I wonder if Rocco Becht and Matt Campbell have like matching Cyclone shirts that they can wear, just to tap into that familiarity. In terms of my answer, I think that the familiarity has to be an edge, has to be an advantage, and will certainly help Rocco Becht in his new place there in Happy Valley.
True.
We got a couple.
True story.
Go ahead.
True story. When I went to Carolina basketball school 5 years in a row, from like the time I was probably 10 till I was 15. And I heard that story over and over. So when I was at Florida State, I had an undershirt that I wore it in the NFL, but sadly, I did not have the same amount of success. It didn't quite work as well for me as it did for MJ, keeping that same undergarment with me forever.
Was it the same undershirt you had on as you were sitting on the back of the Harley in the trading card?
No, that was not it. Maybe if it was, it would have turned out differently. That was my No Fear shirt, which was very trendy back in the day.
Oh, listen, you're still trendy. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. All right, we are going to try to go trending as we continue with our top 5 quarterbacks from each conference. A reminder of what we have from the Big Ten. Same 5 guys, some slight shifting. I'll take Dante Moore at 1, while Danny will take Julian Sayin. We both agree in sort of that top tier at the 3. And then DeMond Williams, Josh Hoover, as we mentioned, no matter which player it is, there's something to prove going out there this fall. Well, coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the Southeastern Conference, where there are some big names that are also on a lot of NFL draft boards, but we just want to know, how good are you going to be in college? All that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, rolling through our quarterback rankings for 2026. We're going conference by conference, and now we turn our attention to the SEC, which annually puts out some of the most draft picks at all positions and includes a couple of interesting NFL draft prospects. But as Danny Kannell mentioned at the top of this show, we are not NFL draft analysts. We are here to talk about college football, and specifically right now, this season. So DK, let's see your top 5 for the 2026 season quarterbacks in the SEC.
All right, before everybody freaks out, just remember, this is who do you trust in college this year more than anybody. That's why Arch Manning is not number 1. He's number 3. Number 1, Trinidad Chambliss jumps off the chart. His playmaking ability, the consistency, already has a playoff win under his belt. I think he's the best quarterback, and I don't think it's close in the SEC. Then I rounded out Gunnar Stockton, Arch Manning, John Mateer, and Byron Brown. And the thing that probably will be eye-popping to some is the fact that I have Gunnar Stockton at 2. But if you do consider, I think Gunnar Stockton is one of the most disrespected quarterbacks in all of college football. He doesn't come on up on any draft boards for what he's going to do, at the next level. And even within the SEC rankings, I don't think he gets enough love for the consistency with which he's brought to that Georgia offense. And maybe some of the offensive question marks, I know there's always a polarizing topic, is Mike Bobo's system, but all Gunnar Stockton is asked and do is go execute that offense. And think about some of the moments he had last year. The Tennessee overtime game when he made some absolutely ginormous throws in that game to convert on fourth down, touchdown passes on the road in Knoxville was outstanding. I know he didn't play great the first time around against Bama, but it's still, there was a big pass that was dropped right out. I think it was in the third quarter that might have been a difference maker. Wasn't his fault. Then think about him. Men in Trinidad Chambliss. What did he do against Trinidad Chambliss? 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions that game. Came up short in the playoffs, but he has absolutely delivered. Again, head-to-head against Arch Manning, 2-0 in those matchups. He has been a winner that I don't think gets enough credit for the job he's done at Georgia. I know he's not the sexiest guy that has all the traits you're looking for, but he is absolutely perfect for what Kirby Smart is looking for.
He has all the traits Kirby Smart's looking for. I mean, forget an NFL
including
draft.
the F-150. The old school F-150.
He drives a truck. He's from Georgia. He puts his head down to get the extra yard. I mean, he's a good leader. Locker room rallies around him. Everything that they love at Georgia, even if it's not there, Danny Kannell loves it as well. He is unquestionably a top 3 quarterback in the SEC. And I agree with you, does not get anywhere close to that amount of respect, maybe from that sort of NFL draft bring. And I do have Gunnar Stockton in my top 3 as well, though I do have Arch Manning at number 1. And some of that does have to do with a strip away the noise, strip away the context. Sometimes I try to make sure we've got context, but Arch Manning is a returning starter at quarterback coming off a 10-win season with great tools. If you forget about the hype, if you forget about the expectations, you forget that his last name's Manning or that he plays at Texas, he is every bit of the kind of player that you would rally around and say, okay, that was a good first season. Now it's time to take off. And I am buying a little bit of stock, throwing him at number 1, not in necessarily where he's going to be drafted, but that he is going to have that kind of season moving forward, where you clean up some of the mistakes, you clean up some of the completion percentage, but you maintain the winning. And yes, since you are playing for Texas, you get them to the playoff instead of ending in the Cheez-It Bowl. I think that Arch Manning is going to have a very good season, but how he will be judged is going to be team related. That's not necessarily fair, but that is the way that we judge quarterbacks these days. I think he's going to be pretty good. That's why I've got him at number 1. Other pieces there, I had Gunnar Stockton, as we mentioned, at 3. Trinidad Chambliss, the playmaking was fantastic. Marcel Reed and John Mateer as well. You had Arch down at 3, Danny. Just sort of overall thoughts on where he sits as a player. Maybe even take the rankings out of this. What are your expectations for Arch Manning going into the season?
Oh, my expectations are huge, just like everybody else's, because I do think this last year was such a part of the normal process that you see with young quarterbacks, but the hype was off the charts last season. Then when everybody was jumping off the ship, remember on Cover 3, I'm telling you guys, it's fine. He'll be okay. But do you remember the conversation that Sark had to give up play calling and what's going on with his facial expressions? And then all you had to do was go look at Eli and Peyton, his uncles, and they threw the ball with kind of the same look. He wasn't hurt. It's just kind of a Manning feature that you get when he throws the ball. I think he'll be fine. I think the sky is the limit. I think it's too rich from a perspective of if you wanted to take a Heisman flyer on him as far as a bet, there's no flyer. Like, you have to pay a premium to take Arch Manning. I mean, shoot, you know how I feel about Texas as a team. Plus, he's going to be working with Cam Coleman this season. They went out and got him the best receiver in the portal, so he's going to have a bunch of targets to work with on the outside. I just think the thing that he needs to work on is just eliminating some of the mistakes, getting more consistent, which I fully expect him to do that this season, but I kind of wanted to see it first. With Trinidad and Gunnar, I felt like they were way more consistent last season, so I cannot trust that process. But we're about to find out with that Week 2 matchup against Ohio State how he does. But I feel very good. Like, if you were saying predicting who I think at the end of the year could be the best, without question, Arch Manning's in that conversation. Okay,
so you did have at number 5 a name that I had at number 10.
Wow.
So connect. I had Sam Levitt ahead of him. I had Keelan Russell ahead of him. I had Lenora Sellers ahead of him. I had Kenny Minchie ahead of him. To sell me on Byron Brown, Auburn's quarterback, moving from USF to Auburn with Alex Golesh. We've got some of the same continuity that we were both applying to why we should be excited about Rocco Becht. Byron Brown's got a lot of physical tools. This is a big step up in competition. What gives you the excitement or the encouragement that he's a player to trust going into the fall?
I saw him in person at the Boca Bowl against Syracuse. Now,
Ooh.
Syracuse, I think, was playing a tight end at quarterback, so it wasn't exactly the stiffest competition on the other side of the ball. But in talking to Alex Golesh the last couple of years, I love some of the intangibles that you see with him just from the leadership perspective. I think it was totally unfair that some of his throws and, practice this offseason at Auburn are like, making fun of him, mocking him. I saw similar things with Baker Mayfield when he was at the Tampa Bay Bucks, saying, oh, what's he going to do? You can clip certain things to make look a certain way, but you have to remember over his career, 61 touchdowns, 19 interceptions. He already has a win under his belt against an SEC opponent in Gainesville against the Florida Gators, in which he played really, really well. He was a 1,000-yard rusher as well as being an exceptional thrower. My biggest concern with that style of play, how does he hold up against the physicality of the SEC, taking that type of pounding? But at 6'3", 231, he looks built for it, but it's a whole nother thing to go through it. But I think he's that player. I know he's been comp to, the Cam Newton style of player that can take over a game. I don't think you see that type of physical dominance, and I do think he has to kind of continue to improve as a passer, but I love what he's done up to this point, and I think it will be a question if he can make that leap, but if he does, this will be a really, really strong first year for Alex Golesh at Auburn.
One thing I could not get over, Danny, when I was going through this list is how many schools in the SEC are taking a risk or looking to unproven at the college level, unproven at the SEC level. I mean, you got to think Jared Curtis at Vanderbilt, Faison Brandon at Tennessee, Aaron Philo at Florida, Austin Simmons at Missouri, KJ Jackson at Arkansas, Kamario Taylor at Mississippi State, Byron Brown, Kenny Minchie. That's daggum half the conference. It's kind of like, what do we want to call him? Like a wild card quarterback scenario? I mean, I think the outcomes in the SEC could be crazy because of the instability at quarterback, but I don't think that they have bad options. It's just a lot of unknown. I don't know how you deal with it or how you're looking at this, but this is outside of the top 5 or 6 names, you could talk me into almost anybody checking in at number 8.
Definitely. I mean, you mentioned Keelan Russell. He hasn't even won the job yet against Austin Mack. I think he probably does, hearing some, and the way he played in the spring game was phenomenal. Florida, Aaron Philo is another one that's a complete wild card. I'm very bullish on what the future holds at Florida, at Gainesville. I think that they bring back a lot of talent, but if they figure it out at quarterback, that's kind of the way I look at a lot of these SEC teams. If they do strike gold, and like Ole Miss found Trinidad Chambliss. Now, he came out of nowhere. Austin Simmons is now at Missouri, another one that you kind of have to take that leap of faith and say, man, could he make that jump? What if he's the player that we thought he was going to be out of high school, and he just got Wally pipped by Trinidad Chambliss, who's awesome, but Austin Simmons still has that talent that we thought he had? That could be a great get for Eli Drinkwitz. So I think there's a lot of unknowns in the SEC, and it'll probably dictate how well these teams are going to be as how well these quarterbacks perform, but there definitely are a lot of question marks. With Mateer, did you have any concern about putting him in your top 5?
No. I think that the disruption of the season that came from the injury gave me a little bit of understanding. I thought he finished pretty good. Ultimately, he came back into the lineup. He got them the wins they needed to make the playoff. I think that overall, I would like to see a full season of healthy Mateer, and I think he'll be better for it. What about you?
Yeah, I think he is what he is. He's sort of that swashbuckler type player that, is very physical, that can put his nose down and get that extra yardage. I do think before he hurt his thumb, the Michigan game comes to mind. There were some throws in there, and they won the game, and it was like peak Mateer Heisman hype. And then he did get hurt. It kind of derailed it. But even in that game, it was a little bit sloppy, but that's kind of the style of play that he gets. I'd like to see him play a little bit cleaner. I'd like to see him have a better run game, which I do think Oklahoma will give him. Neither one of us had Sam Leavitt on the list. Another one that I am kind of curious to see what type of jump he makes this year for LSU. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's on that list. Some of that has to do with health, him getting healthy this year, but also there's a trust there with Lane Kiffin. The job he's done developing quarterbacks has been outstanding. So I think he's somebody that was just on the outside. Raw potential, I think you would have him on there, but I kind of need to see a little bit more of a body of work from Sam Leavitt.
Yeah, the Sam Leavitt case to me is that if we were if we were just throwing out a conversation, he's undoubtedly right there, a name that we make sure that we mention. But when I had to start splitting hairs, John Mateer, was a college football playoff quarterback. Marcel Reed was a college football playoff quarterback. Gunnar Stockton, Trinidad Chambliss. I mean, the only one who hasn't taken a snap at the college football playoff is Arch Manning. You know, I mean, this just, we've kind of got some bona fides of guys who've gone out there and done it. So I don't have any doubts what a fully healthy Sam Leavitt could be in terms of being effective. But when I'm ranking these guys, I just gave the edge to some of these other players that were just a little bit more established. But fun stuff to keep an eye on. You mentioned Trinidad Chambliss coming out of nowhere. Boston College has a D2 transfer from Saginaw Valley State. So will Chestnut Hill Chambliss make it into our ACC power rankings? We'll see, because coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the Atlantic Coast Conference top 5 quarterbacks from each of Danny Kannell and myself. All that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, rolling through quarterback rankings for each of the power conferences, and now we turn our attention to the ACC. So we have to, of course, give the honors on the T-Box to the ACC Player of the Year, Danny Kannell. DK, take us through your top 5.
So I think number 1 is clear-cut, head and shoulders above the rest of the pack. Darian Mensah, already an ACC champion at Duke. And the irony of him going to Miami, where they still are looking for an ACC title as a team, is pretty outstanding. But Darian Mensah, I think the sky is the limit for him. I think he is going to be the best quarterback that Mario Cristobal has had there down at Miami statistically. He's going to be working with one of the best receivers in the country in Malachi Toney. Cooper Barkate comes with him to Duke. Statistically, I think he's going to put up bigger numbers than Cam Ward or Carson Beck put up down there in Miami. So I think he is head and shoulders above the rest of the pack. And then at number 2, I think it's a pretty clear-cut 1 and 2 with Darian Mensah at 1, and then Kevin Jennings. Rhett Lashley, I think he gets justifiably annoyed that his quarterback gets overlooked oftentimes in top 10 lists, top 5 lists. All he's done is won. He's taken him to the college football playoff, and I do think some of the surrounding reputation and why he doesn't get the respect is people still remember the playoff game at Penn State, which was abysmal. It was one of his worst performances that he had as a starter. But I will remind you, he did take them to the college football playoff. He had them in the ACC title race again last season and came up just short because they couldn't get a couple stops in the Big 12 or against Cal. They couldn't get it done. A little bit, he's got to play more consistent, eradicate some of the turnovers. But I will remind you, on one leg against the University of Miami, delivered big in that game, getting the win over the Miami Hurricanes. So I think it was a pretty clear-cut 1, and I had Kevin Jennings right behind him at number 2. And then with the ACC, I'm curious to see what your list looks like, because I do think it's way more of a crapshoot where you could, kind of spray the board a little bit with some of these quarterbacks and make a strong case for any one of them, sort of to be in this top 5.
So I actually have Kevin Jennings at 3. Rhett, I know you're a huge fan of the Cover 3 podcast. I know that you're going to be upset about this. I've got Darian Mensah as my number 1. I've got CJ Bailey as my number 2 from NC State. Kevin Jennings at 3. And that's where I drew my line. Like you, I also have Jaron Sagapolitelli up inside the top 5. That is 100% based on the excitement and some projection. I saw potential. I saw performance. I saw some limited production from JKS that suggests that things could be really exciting once he improves the roster around him. Tosh Lupoy, new head coach there at Cal, I think has done a good job of that. So, I am sort of spinning it a bit forward. Again, not playing NFL draft here, but just saying I saw this. I'm expecting this going into the fall. I think that Jaron Sagapolitelli is going to be a top 5 quarterback. And then Mason Heinschel, just the way that he was able to step right in was incredibly impressive to me. That's why I round out the 5. But, real quickly on the CJ Bailey, Kevin Jennings part of this, where, you've obviously got Kevin Jennings at 2. I'm so glad you mentioned that doing that on one wheel, because the intangible factor that I have to give to Kevin Jennings should not go overlooked. This guy was named a co-captain by his teammates before he was even the starting quarterback. I mean, this is somebody who the entire locker room rallies around. He goes out there, he puts his body on the line, and like you mentioned, all he does is win. He's got that experience factor for me. CJ Bailey, it felt like last season we really started to see him come out of his shell. Unfortunately, they are losing a lot of skill position talent, but I just think that that NC State team is so excited about the way that Bailey showed a lot of growth, and I do think that CJ Bailey is going to have a very, very good 2026. Now, the interesting piece of this, because you and I both have the same top 5, Danny, is who else even threatened? Because as I was going through, there's a lot of question marks. In the SEC, there's a lot of question marks. In the ACC, there's a lot of question marks as well. If you and I both have the same top 5, there is a comfort level with that group. What are some names that got you a little uncomfortable as you were trying to think about who might also contend for a spot in the top 5?
Man, I really liked Ethan Grunkemeyer a lot. What we saw from him at Penn State when he stepped into the lineup early, came in, he played against Indiana, struggled a little bit, had a little bit of interception problems, but then on the back end of the season, really started to get comfortable in that system. The raw skill set is there. He's following James Franklin, obviously, to Virginia Tech, but the skill set, I think he's somebody who absolutely popped on there that I was considering putting at 5, but he just doesn't have the bigger body of work, but I think he'll be more than comfortable. And then the other one, Lincoln Kienholz at Louisville. Jeff Brom is a quarterback guru. He will figure out a way to win games. I think you'll have somebody that's more mobile that he's had as a quarterback for a while. And again, there's nothing wrong. There's only one ball for quarterbacks, right? And at Ohio State, Julian Sayin won that quarterback battle. It doesn't mean that Lincoln Kienholz, I believe Ryan Day when he said it was a pretty close battle and those guys were pretty close at who would have won that job. And if that's the case and that's the skill set that you're going to work with Jeff Brom at Louisville, I think the sky's the limit with what he could do. Just hasn't been able to see much of a body of work from him, but I think he could be somebody that easily cracks this list at the end of the season.
It was a spot where I knew that I could not get low and not include Lincoln Kienholz, but I can't use a Cotton Bowl against Missouri as a reason to throw him up above players who I've seen more of. I mean, to be fair, I've seen more of Ethan Grunkemeyer. I've seen Ethan Grunkemeyer go in and play well against a defense that went on to win the national championship. I have seen some there. I had Grunkemeyer on my list. Steve Angeli, if he can be back, and be fully healthy again, that's another one to keep your eye on. Ashton Daniels for your Knowles. Bo Prabula, if he does end up winning the job at UVA, and a few more. But yeah, just kind of like the SEC and kind of like a lot of these conferences, a lot of wild cards once you get outside that top tier that's going to end up determining who ends up winning those games in the ACC. Well, coming up on the other... Go ahead. Go ahead.
When was the last time we had an ACC list and we didn't even mention a Clemson quarterback? Because I do think Christopher Vizina, I know there's been some speculation, does he even hang on the job? He's getting pressed by a freshman, but I just think it's wild. It kind of speaks to where Clemson's flying under the radar. The win total's pretty low. In large part, I think it's because the uncertainty at quarterback, but even the expectations for Vizina are incredibly low considering the run of success they've had at QB over the last 10 to 15 years.
Would you rather have Chris Vizina or Alberto Mendoza?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I don't know with either one. I don't know. I'd flip a coin.
I'll take Alberto, but it's not the right answer, or it's not made for the right reasons. It's just, I'll take as much of the pixie dust that's around there. You spent 1 year with Cignetti? That's good enough for me. You got to bring some kind of winning along the way. That's right. Okay. Coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to the Big 12, a conference that does not have Brendan Sorsby in the mix for 2026. Maybe more on Sorsby later, but it does have at least one name that we've been circling for a while as a potential Heisman dark horse. All that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, quarterback rankings, conference by conference. Now we turn our attention to the Big 12. And maybe Brendan Sorsby would have been at the top of this list if he was eligible for 2026, but now not a part of the picture. The Big 12 title landscape, Big 12 quarterback landscape, all of that has gone and been thrown up into the air. Where do the pieces fall? Danny Kannell, how do you stack up the top of the Big 12 when it comes to the quarterback position?
I mean, you talk about spin the wheel, just see where it stops on. I think this conference probably fits that bill more than anyone we've discussed so far. But at the top, I do think it's hard not to have somebody that has 73 career touchdown passes against 24 interceptions, over 9,000 passing yards. And oh, by the way, last year very quietly led Arizona to a 9-4 season. That was probably the quietest 9-4 in the country. Now, Arizona's defense was outstanding last year, but Noah Fifita, remember how many lists he showed up on a couple years ago after his first year as the starter, and then he just vanished from the scene. Everybody wrote him off, said, "Oh, he must not be that good." Dealt with a coaching change, but now that he's been more comfortable playing with Brent Brennan, he has really settled in as one of the premier players in the Big 12, which is why I felt more than comfortable with Noah Fifita at the top of my list. Probably a little bit disrespectful to one other quarterback on here I know we're going to discuss when you get your list, but I had him at the top. I had Drew Mestamaker, the quarterback who's making the jump, going from the group of 5 up to the Power 4, following his coach to Oklahoma State. Drew Mestamaker led the country last year in passing. I mean, he was absolutely outstanding. Somebody who didn't even play high school football, didn't come in with a lot of fanfare, but absolutely delivered on the field. And then there was a quarterback that I wanted to highlight because I do think sometimes you just have to kind of find your level. We saw Bo Nix struggle in the SEC. Then he goes out to Oregon and lights it up. I think Connor Wegman is somebody who had all this hype around him in the SEC, and at one time people were saying he was going to take Texas A&M to the promised land, fell well short of those, but I feel like he's found his level in the Big 12 and really quietly had an outstanding year for Willie Fritz last year at Houston. It's one of the reasons I think Houston is one of those kind of dark horse contenders within the Big 12. So I think Connor Wegman getting more comfortable, we might see some of that talent that people were raving about coming out of high school and early in the SEC where he just couldn't stay healthy, couldn't put it all together. He put it together last year for Houston, so I had him in my top 5, checking in at number 3.
Yeah, great call. Houston, Arizona, both teams that went under the radar last year. And I know that we did our job as much as we could, but just to go back and look at last season, spin it forward, they both have their returning quarterbacks. They both have, after making coaching changes, a couple years to be able to build it up. So I definitely understand why you're buying some of that stock. I am shocked that you are not coming to buy up any. I mean, when you're looking for a fighter, it's in his family. It's in his blood. When you look at someone who's going to be able to bounce back, you want Avery Johnson. You want Kansas State quarterback Avery Johnson because Kansas State has a new head coach. That is Colin Klein. And I think that Colin Klein, a dual threat quarterback of great repute in his own right at Kansas State back in the day, is going to be able to unlock the next level for Avery Johnson. I'm with you with Mestamaker. I just would not be surprised if we look up and he's one of the top quarterbacks in the country in terms of production. Love the Fifita shout out and Bear Bachmeier as well. But my number 1 is Devin Dampier. I just think that Devin Dampier last season and Utah last season, a lot of it fell sort of like below the radar. A quiet 10-win season for Dampier last season. Now he's got a new offensive coordinator as Jason Beck goes to Michigan. He's got a new head coach as Morgan Scalley takes over and Kyle Whittingham goes. But I still think that after watching him all the way back in New Mexico, Dampier still has the kind of tools to be able to be really, really effective. He checked in at your number 4 on that one. Would you be surprised if Utah's contending for a Big 12 title this season?
No, not at all. That's got a winning tradition, winning culture. They're elevating from within with the head coach, moving Morgan Scalley to that position from the defensive side of the ball. I was probably too harsh on Dampier from the 2 biggest games he had against Texas Tech, where he really struggled to throw the football. He had the 2 costly turnovers, again, against one of the best defenses in the country. And in the BYU game, it wasn't all on him, but just I'd like to see him clean up play. But from the sheer athleticism, playmaking ability, he is absolutely off the charts. But I just need to see him take that little bit next step as a passer.
Well, we mentioned Brendan Sorsby's name at the beginning of this. NFL said no supplemental draft for Mr. Sorsby, so that means he enters the 2027 picture. We've talked a lot of quarterbacks over the course of the last 48 minutes or so, but how do they stack up against Brendan Sorsby and each other? Sorsby against the 2027 NFL draft class and more. Next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, well, we've run through the Big Ten and the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12. We've laid out our top 5 quarterbacks in each conference, but there's one quarterback that would have been on the list for the Big 12 and was certainly on our list going into the season in terms of a watch list. That was Brendan Sorsby. Now, Brendan Sorsby is going to be part of the 2027 NFL draft class after he was ruled ineligible in college and the NFL said no supplemental drafts. So, in the wake of that, let's start to look at it from the NFL draft perspective. Now, Danny Kannell, you get to wear many, many hats here at CBS Sports. In addition to gracing us with your talents on the Cover 3 podcast, you cover the NFL, you cover the NFL draft. So, as a quarterback evaluator, how are you looking at some of the quarterbacks that we've talked about today, and where does Brendan Sorsby fit into the mix there?
Man, I have been astounded by some of the takes that I've heard on Brendan Sorsby over the last few weeks. Like now learning that he wasn't going to be, eligible this season. But it started really when there was, going to be a supplemental draft. It was what team's going to give up a first rounder for him? Like, I don't think anybody is. I think we said that on the Cover 3. I'm like, I would be shocked if somebody gave up a first rounder for him. Now that we know that is not going to be the case, it's not what are you going to give up. It's actually how are you going to stack up against these other quarterbacks. And this is where I really think Brendan Sorsby is going to be hurt, missing out on this season of college football, because I think he needed to show more consistency and more development as a passer. I do think there's a reason when you see the highlight rips of him, it's probably every, half of the plays that you see him are making running plays because he's incredibly athletic. He can make all the plays as a runner, but it's harder to find those exceptional throws that NFL talent and NFL scouts are looking for. So with that being said, I do think Arch Manning, I think he is the best quarterback in this class from a raw talent, skills perspective. What does he bring to the table? I had Arch at number 1, Dante Moore at number 2. I do think there's a reason why Dante Moore last season, if he would have come out, was, probably going to be the second overall quarterback taken. I love it selfishly as a college fan that he's coming back to Oregon to really cement his skills and take that other year of development. And I think he lives up to that. Then I have Jaden Maeva. We talked about him. We ranked our Big Ten quarterbacks. He is outstanding. I think he's going to be somebody that really has another solid year. He fits what the NFL is doing now as both a runner and as a passer. And then I'm still waiting for Brendan Sorsby. I still don't have him in this list just yet because of CJ Carr. In just his first year, I was blown away with how comfortable he was operating in the system as a freshman quarterback. And it goes back to his first game against Miami. I was like, where did this kid come from? Man, he looks comfortable. I think he's going to get even better. I wish he was playing against a little bit stiffer competition. Maybe we'll get to see that in the college football playoff. And then still, CJ Bailey, from a raw talent perspective, at 6'5", he is a monster who also has a cannon for an arm. I think he has a higher ceiling as a thrower, and he's also almost as athletic. Maybe doesn't run as physically as Brendan Sorsby does. And then I have Brendan Sorsby. So I think Brendan Sorsby is really going to be hurt by missing this entire season. But if you just looked at all the tape right now, I would have him as the 6th best quarterback in the class of 2027 draft.
Yeah, finished the season losing 4 of his last 6 games. Yeah, Cincinnati last year. Some of the performance against some of the best teams weren't there. Drafting Brendan Sorsby is drafting on tools more than tape. Is that fair? Like you're just looking at him and projecting that?
Absolutely. That's why I think you needed to see another year of really polished tape, and having better talent around you, having a better defense on the other side, because I do think he might have played himself into a top 5, into the top 3. But without that, I think these other quarterbacks are going to be able to really get even better and improve on their tape when Sorsby has to sit there, on the sidelines. Unfortunately for him, I think that's really going to hurt his draft stock.
Okay, last word here. We did not get a chance to mention CJ Carr. Apologies to Notre Dame. You're not in a conference. Right. Do you think that CJ Carr what are the expectations for him?
Oh, undefeated season for Notre Dame. And some of that has to do with the schedule.
No big deal.
But I also think national championship contender. I mean, don't forget, just a couple years ago, they were in the national championship game, and they had an outstanding, quarterback in Riley Leonard. But I do think he brings an element to the passing game that they lacked that season. He is the total package that can absolutely bring Notre Dame a national championship.
Yeah, my expectation, CJ Carr is the top 10 quarterback in the country. Will he be top 5, top 3, Heisman Trophy? That's going to depend on the wins and the losses by the end of this? Well, we here on the Cover 3 podcast are live every single Monday and Thursday, Wednesday and Tuesday's shows coming soon as well. Scan that QR code to download and listen the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your fine podcasts.